Welcome viewers. In this lecture, I'll be discussing about organizational culture, how it affects success of merger and acquisition. We will understand organization's culture is manageable or not, and we will also discuss about the list of conditions that favor successful change of a culture, and then finally we will discuss about various steps to enact cultural change in an organization. So the learning objective is organizational culture, how it affects success of merger and acquisition, understanding culture, whether it is manageable or not, conditions which are favorable for successful change in a culture, and various steps to enact cultural change. We will start the discussion with a key debate like, are cultures manageable? Is it manageable enough to have cultural integration? So, an organization's culture consists of stories, symbols, rituals, shared values, belief, and norms which are shared by all members in an organization, and there are various aspects of the culture. So, when an organization's culture may have been appropriate for a certain time and a set of conditions, an organization's culture may have been appropriate, but time and conditions keep changing, keep evolving because of the constant pressure of various external factors. For example, forces of foreign competition, there are changes in government regulations, rapid innovation and growth, changing preferences of customers, and new technologies may leave an organization's existing culture unsuitable. So, in such case, management can alter those factors that have created and sustained the current culture. That is, just as cultures are learned, they can be also unlearned. So, with this, we initiate the discussion is to understand whether the culture can be managed, with how to sustain a culture, can we have a change in the culture. The selection process, top management's actions, and methods for socialization of employees help in sustaining a culture. As we understand, all these factors have helped in creating a sustainable culture. Stories, rituals, materials, symbols, languages are by means which employees learn and identify what is important for them. It is guiding the behavior of employees. By changing these factors, we should be able to change the culture. Is it possible to transform the culture? Top management might, for example, fire or demote employees who are rigidly locked in the current culture and replace them with individuals who accept and promote the values that are sought after. So, what I wanted to say here, as technology is transforming, new technologies are replacing the workplace with the advent of artificial intelligence, machine learning, digital technologies in the workplace. So, a rigid culture transform the behavior of people because the organization or the top management has to quickly transform the way they function. So, there are various cases we will be further discussing. Now, we are looking for a case which is against managing culture. The organizational culture are made up of relatively stable characteristics would imply that they are very difficult to manage change. Culture takes a long time to form, a strong culture takes several years to form, and once established, they tend to become entrenched and resistant to change initiatives. So, strong cultures are particularly resistant to any change because employees have become committed to what they are doing, they have almost become complacent. For employees to unlearn what they have learnt in the past, their years of experience and memories, is a difficult task. So, even if the change of culture is manageable, it is challenging and time consuming to change. When culture may be theoretically changeable, the time frame necessary to unlearn sets of values and replace them with the new sets of values may be so long so as to make the effort realistically impractical. So, further there are number of forces in an organization that work to maintain its present culture. This would include written statements about the organization's mission and philosophy, the design of physical space and building, the dominant leadership pattern, past selection practices, rituals, popular stories about key people and events, organizations' holistic performance evaluation criteria, reward criteria, and the organization's formal structure. To illustrate, the selection practices tend to work against culture. Employees choose the organizations because they perceive their values are good fit with the organization. They are comfortable with the fit and will strongly resist efforts that might undermine the predictability and security of their status quo. Finally, the reality is that if the culture could be changed, surely management will do that. So, if an organization could install a culture such as that exists at IBM, McDonald's, or any other successful organization, it would surely be incorporated. And just because you can describe the type of culture you would like to have does not imply that you can implement such a culture. So, understanding the various situational factors, the foregoing discussion suggests that the real question one should seek answer for is not the culture to be managed, but rather there are certain conditions under which culture can be managed. So, this leads us to a situational analysis of conditions that are required or necessary to facilitate cultural change. These ideas are based on the observation as well as substantive research. Nevertheless, there seems to be an increasing agreement among theorists as the importance of following situational factors is a dramatic crisis, leadership turnover, life cycle stage, age and size of the organization, the strength of current culture, whether it is a strong culture, weak culture, absence of subculture, whether subcultures exist or not. The crisis like condition or the dramatic crisis is the condition that is most universally acknowledged as having to exist before culture can be changed, is a dramatic crisis that is widely perceived by the organizational members. This is the shock that undermines the status quo. It calls into question current practices and opens the door towards accepting a new sets of values that can respond better to the crisis. The crisis, of course, need not be real to be effective. The key is perceived as real by the organizational members. Examples of such crisis would include a surprising financial setback, the hostile takeover by a focal organization to by another organization, the loss of major customer or the client, a dramatic technology breakthrough by competitor. Leadership turnover is another situational factor. Since top management is a major factor in transmitting culture, a change in organization's key leadership positions facilitates imposition of new values. But a new leader is no assurance that employees will accept the new values, will accept the proposed values by the new leader. The new leader may have a clear alternative vision of what the organization can be. There must be respect for the leadership's ability, and new leaders must have the power to enact their alternative vision. So, without an alternative set of values, new leadership is unlikely to differ from what has been proved successful in the past. Leadership turnover must encompass the organization's chief executives, but it is not limited to this position. The likelihood of successful cultural change typically increases with major management positions rather than having previous executives accept the new leader's values. It is usually more effective to replace people with individuals who have no vested interest in the old culture. The third factor is life cycle stage. Another situational factor, cultural change is easier when organization is in transition from the formative to the growth stage, from maturity to the decline stage. As the organization moves into growth, major changes will be necessary. as their new customers, new products, new market they are approaching. So these changes are more likely to be accepted because the culture is less entrenched. However, other factors will facilitate acceptance of change. Age and size of organization. Age of the organization, regardless of the life cycle stage, the younger an organization is, less entrenched its values will be. Uh, Cultural change is more likely to be accepted in an organization that is 5 years old than one which is 50 years old. Size of the organization, it is proposed that cultural change is easier to implement in a very small organization, because in such organizations it is easier for management to reach employees. Communication is clear, the role models are more visible, accessible, thus enhancing opportunity to disseminate new values. Another situational factor to change culture is absence of subculture. Heterogeneity increases members' concern with protecting their self interest and resisting change. Therefore, we would expect that more subcultures there are, the more resistance will be in place. There will be more resistance to change in dominant culture. So, proposition is absence of subculture will be another factor which will lead to cultural change. Another factor is size. Larger organizations can have more resistance to cultural change because they typically tend to be to have more subcultures. So, how to enact the cultural change? Previous discussion reviewed various conditions under which cultural change is likely to be implemented and accepted. We have this question in hand. If conditions are right, how does management go about enacting the cultural change? The challenge is to unfreeze the current culture. No single action alone, it is likely to have an impact necessary to change something that is entrenched and highly valued. Therefore, there is a need for a comprehensive and coordinated strategy to manage culture. Now, let us understand what is cultural analysis. Or to go for a cultural change, it is very important to have a cultural analysis that would include cultural audit to assess the current culture, comparison of the present culture against what is desired, the gap evaluation to identify what cultural elements need to be changed. The cultural audit should look at the current culture in terms of various dimensions. Like, additionally, three basic questions will be answered in order to tap the content of the culture. First, what is the background of the founders and others who have been their followers or who have followed them? Second is, how did organizations respond to the past crisis? If so ever there was any crisis, what was their action or other critical events? What was learned from these experiences? So, we can also find out the instances in the past, the instances of crisis, what was the action adopted by organization. The third can be who are considered deviants or people who have deviated from the culture, and how does the organization respond to them. In this case, deviants are the people who have bypassed the norms and routines of organizations, the norms, values, like whistleblowers. What was the treatment to the whistleblowers in the past? Then these answers to the questions will reveal how particular value has been formed and the order of these values, and whether the culture's boundaries, what are the culture's boundaries. The next step in the cultural analysis requires articulation of the values sought in the new culture. The desired culture can then be compared against the current organization's culture. And the final step in the cultural analysis is to identify what cultural dimensions and values are out of the alignment and what is the need for change. It is very unlikely that the core values will be found unacceptable and require any modification. So, this step will focus attention only on the specific current values and need modification. Once the gaps have been identified, consideration can be given to the specific actions that will directly correct the discrepancies. Enacting the cultural change, we have discussed about the importance of dramatic crisis and the means to unfreeze a complacent or entrenched culture. The crises are not always evident to all members, and therefore it may be necessary to make crisis more visible. It is important that it is clear to everyone and that organization's survival is legitimately threatened. If employees do not see the sense of urgency or urgency for change, it is likely that strong culture will respond much to change efforts. So, the appointment of top executives likely to dramatize the major changes are going to take place. There are people who act as advocates for bringing about change. He or she can offer new role models and new standards of behavior, which is expected in order to change the status quo from the present to what is desired. And however, this executive needs to introduce the new vision of the organization quickly and fill key positions with the individuals who are loyal to his vision. He need to identify the people who can take his vision forward, who can be change agents. So it is responsibility for the individual to identify people, like minded people who can be the ambassadors for change. The responsibility for communicating new values lies with top management. And it has been suggested that communication must include three basic elements. The first being the state of business and its competitors, the outlook for the future, the other information that someone with a keen interest in fortunes of the organization would want to have. The second is the vision, what the organization is to become and how it will achieve this. So there has to be a vision for change, and the strategy is clearly explained of how to reach at desired status quo. The progress of the organization in areas that are identified as key to realization of the vision. Then, along with the shake-up amongst the key management personnel, also makes sense to initiate a reorganization, the creation of new departments, new offices or units by combination of some and elimination of other units convey it is a visible term that management is determined to move in the new direction, and where one strong subculture, the extensive use of job rotation, will contribute towards breaking them up. Reorganization, when combined with replacing or reassessing people in key positions, can also be used to increase the power of those who accept and new values or espouse the values. Leadership may want or will want to move quickly to create new stories, symbols, rituals to replace existing values or existing stories. Delays will allow the current culture to be associated with new leadership and thus closing the window of opportunity for change. Finally, management will want to change the selection and socialization process and the evaluation and reward systems to support employees who espouse the new values and also need to be changed accordingly. It is unlikely that implementation of most of all these suggestions result in an immediate or dramatic shift in organization's culture. However, we have learnt that managing culture is a lengthy process, is a long term process which is measured in terms of years and not in months. So, studies have also been suggesting that 2 years would represent a good rapid turnaround in a culture, and with 4 to 5 years being more than enough. So, concluding the discussion here, in this lecture, we have discussed how cultures affect success or failure of mergers and acquisitions. Then, we have also understood certain key issues or debates surrounding the organization's culture, which have concerns whether it is good or not to manage organization, whether or not it can be cultural change can be managed or not. Then, we have also understood the key debate surrounding organizational culture concerns, whether or not it can be managed or changed. It is also evident that culture can be changed, but there appears to be several conditions which are necessary to bring about change. Finally, we have concluded with a discussion on enacting a cultural change where conditions are favorable. We have discussed about several conditions, and however, managers should not expect any rapid, acceptable, and new cultural values. Thank you.